Alright, so today we are going to be talking about adding some ladders into our video game. There's a couple steps going into this, but first we're going to do some housekeeping. We're going to get rid of all these gravity helpers. We're going to then go over to our level. We're going to go to the foreground where all the colliders are at. And we're going to add a platform effector 2D to this game. And so looking over here to where it says Composite Collider 2D, you can simply click this button that says Used by Effector, and then this platform effector will be effective. And if you go over here to the sides, this as long as this use side friction is not checked, then the sides will from now on just make you slip and slide down off, and it will now work correctly. Run over and we will no longer be able to run on those walls without you having all those ugly gravity helpers. I got helped out inside the comments, by the way. Somebody told me about this. I had no idea platform effectors existed, so this is pretty awesome. Thank you to the person who left that comment. Now let's go on and start making these ladders happen. Okay, so first thing first, let's go into our animator for our player because we got to do some cleaning up here because we're going to need to have a whole new animation for our climb animation in order for it to work out. And right now this is a spaghetti string mess. And so the big problem with this is that with every state that's in here, it needs to have a to and then a from, you know what I mean? So you, for instance, going from idle, you can go to run, hurt, you can go to all these other states, and it has to have a transition going off the idle to all of them, and then from all of them to idle. It's crazy. So instead of that, we're going to create a new state called pick state, and pick state will have no animation inside of it at all. So we take a look at things that are going to idle. We realize that is state 0. So if we simply have a transition going from pick state over to that, and then we can just have state equals 0 onto here. Then when we have a transition going from idle to pick state, we can just simply have an state does not equal 0. Going from that, and then we just do our animations the same exact way that we used to do it in the past, where we uncheck has access time, we uncheck fixed duration, and we set the transition duration to 0, and that will make it so that it's nice and smooth. We do the same thing for the other one, and then we're just going to repeat this process with all of our animations, having a transition to the pick state and having a transition from the pick state. So I'm going to go ahead and speed this up as I go through the rest of this. Now we delete all the transitions that are not leading to pick state, so just be careful, move things around and fix that up. So for instance, fall to idle needs to go, and so on and so forth. I'm going to speed this up as I go through that process. Now the only transitions that exist is a back and forth between the pick state and all these other ones. So 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, that is the state numbers that each one of these are on. So if yours are in that is correct on that, so meaning that this is the transition for state 0 over here, and then so on and so forth going through the rest of these, that will help you out so that it should match up like this now. Your state should look like this, a lot cleaner, and we can simply add in our climb state now as state number, I believe it's 5. Yeah, state number 5. And it'll help us out quite a bit. And there we go. We have fixed up and cleaned up our animation system. We'll add in the climb animation at a later point after we extend our script a little bit. So I'm going to double check my transitions really fast. And there we go, all my transitions are all set, and I should be all set inside of the animation system. So let's go forward and start to make our new level that is going to have the ladder. I like to actually just go File, Save Scene As, in order to get a new scene that basically has everything I need inside of it already, and then just reorder things. And I'll simply create a ladder scene. You can name yours whatever you want. And now that this is now our ladder scene, we're going to just go over to our level, our foreground, and I'm going to just erase everything that is inside this bottom part right here, selecting the eraser and simply erasing through. The game will run a little bit better if I just unselect that background and then just go through and erase on the foreground like so, because that background has a lot of tiles on it. I should have just left it as one big tile instead of making, 5 billion little tiles on it. It would have ended up working out a lot better, running a lot smoother. I'm going to start deleting all these things that I do not need, such as the collectibles, these eagles, the frog, and this. I'm going to now turn back on my player, my camera, which I turned off because I was scared that I would delete them. I'll turn back on my background. I'll go back to the tile palette. I'll select this rectangle tool. I'll make sure that we are going to be painting onto the background. I'll select this black tile right here. And the reason why we're going to go with this black tile is because the background of the ladder is black, and I just want it to look right. I'll zoom way out like so. It'll run really clunky, and the reason why it's running really clunky is because of how many tiles are inside of that background tile set. I use the rectangle tool to all at once change that tile, and then I want to switch off this background so it stops running so clunky. I'm going to go to the rectangle tool, I'm going to select, and I'll move over the house somewhat closer like so, and we'll start to build up a level here. Oh, so first thing first, let's build up our new foreground. So if we build up a floor right here using these purple tiles, we'll have something nifty like that. That's good enough. And then I'll select this whole shelf thingy right over here and put it up quite a bit higher, like that. I'll move over the house like this, kind of put these dark bricks underneath the house there. And, you know, that'll do for a quick demo level on creating this ladder. Now, the thing about the ladder is that it cannot be inside the foreground because the foreground automatically has colliders set on it, and we want it so that this ladder does not have a collider automatically set on it. So we need to now create a whole new layer just for that. So let's go over to our level. Let's go and right-click on level itself, and we're going to go over to where it says 2D object. We're going to put a whole new tile map on there. We're going to rename this as the middle ground. We're going to just kind of move it in between both these. Doesn't really matter with the tile map system, but yeah, old habits die hard. We're going to go over to sorting layer. We're going to add a whole new sorting layer. We're going to add the middle sorting layer. Now, the thing about the middle is it needs to be underneath our player. So our player needs to be on top of it instead of the drawing, but it needs to be on top of our background, right? So in order to make that happen, we can simply drag this right here. Remember that the sorting layers draw in the order that we have it. So default will draw first, then back, then middle, then entity, then foreground, and then camera. That's the order that it draws in, meaning that this stuff will be in the background and this stuff will be in the front. So we go over back to middle ground, we simply click this button next sorting layer and we select middle inside of there, and that will make that happen. We go over to our tile palette and we make sure that we are painting on middle ground, and then we go over to where the ladder is and we draw ourselves a nice, whoa, that is not a nice ladder. We draw ourselves a nice ladder, and then I'm gonna actually extend my foregrounds, the level part a little bit here so that it just goes out a little bit past that point, because I don't want our character to just fall off the side of the world there where he reaches the end. And that should do it. So we go back into our level really quick just to make sure that this whole thing is going to work out. Good, we can't jump up on there, and we can run around on here. So we've got the setup. Oh, and if you're able to jump through your level now, that's actually because of the platform effector. So if you go over to level and then you click on the foreground over here and you go over to where your platform effector is at, and then you simply make it so this one way is turned off right there. So if I take my face out of this, you see that it says one way right there, and it says use one way. If you unclick that checkbox right there, that's like, you know, where inside platform games where you can like jump through the bottom of the platform and get to the top yeah, so you can get up on the higher platforms. Yeah, we're gonna turn that off for our game for now. And now I'll be hitting this like so, and everything is working correctly. So now we need to make a whole new state for our character so that he can now start to climb up on things, and let's get that running. So let's go to our player controller where all the magic happens, and let's make some climb functionality into this game. Alright, over here inside of our player controller, we're going to scroll down to where the finite state machine is at, and we're going to go and just add climb right onto the end of that. We're going to go down here below that. We're going to actually add some ladder variables into this. Namely, we want to add a variable called canClimb. That's the very basic, which will make it so we can climb. Well, it'll be the trigger point, I guess we could say. So we need this to be set by something else, by a collider within the game. So if we go back into the game over here, we right click onto the middle ground, we create an empty object off of that. We're going to call this object the ladder collider. Now we're going to take a look at this ladder collider, which is not lined up with the ladder at all. We're going to make sure that its location is actually correct for that. Then we're going to take it off of the middle ground altogether because we don't need it to be part of the level. Now it's important for this its x coordinate to be right in the middle of that ladder, because later on we're going to be using this coordinate right here to set our player location. So make sure that you have this set. This is an important step, guys. Okay? So you want the x to not be 0 and everything else to be 0, except for the scale. So we're going to add a component. We're going to add a component. Seriously, I swear I'm going through puberty again. Box Collider 2D. And we're going to edit this collider to make it so that it is about the size of this ladder over here. And we're going to set it to isTrigger. And then below the ladder collider itself, we're going to create an empty object. We're going to create it called top of ladder. We're going to add a component, box collider 2D, and we are going to simply drag this one on up to the top like so. We're going to edit it so that it's where our character is supposed to stop being able to climb up. So about, let's say right here. We're going to set isTrigger to true, and then we're going to right click on ladder collider one more time, and we're going to create another empty object. We're going to add another box collider 2D. We're going to scroll this down to the bottom like so. And honestly, I don't think we even really need it inside of this one, but we're going to head to isTrigger just in case, just to kind of showcase what this is and what it does. Oh, we should also rename that to bottom of ladder. So now that we have our three kind of components there, we need to add a script to kind of control all of this. We're going to name it ladder, and we're going to hit new script. It's going to name ladder, and let's get this going. So back over here in scripting, instead of our new ladder script, I'm going to go ahead and move this bracket on down, and we're gonna get this running. Okay, so we need the ladder to kind of be aware of what part is what. So we're gonna create a new enumerator called ladder parts. So let's go ahead and start with that. It's only gonna be used inside of here, so let's do private enum ladder parts. Ladder parts good. And then we're gonna call it complete bottom top, right? And then we're going to serialize a field ladder part, and this ladder part will be part. I'm going to default it to have something defaulted onto that. Now, whenever a trigger is triggered, we use that conversation with Unity, kind of like start and update does. And this conversation point is called onTriggerEnter2D, and there's also an onTriggerExit2D. Now, this happens when the collider enters that thing, so when it first crosses over, and then when it exits it as well. We're going to be using both of those. So private void onTriggerEnter2D, and it should autocomplete like this with a collider 2D collision in there. Private void onTriggerExit2D. And again, you want it to autocomplete and have collider 2D collision inside of there, as well as the parameters, so that we can use these parameters within these brackets right here. Now, I've explained this before, but just to make sure that everybody knows what's going on, onTriggerEnter2D is triggered when these two 2D colliders intersect like so. So right here, you see this green box is over where the ladder is at, and then there's a green box surrounding the ladder as well, like that. So that is when onTriggerEnter triggers, and onTriggerExit triggers when it goes back out of that, right? So we want canClimb to trigger true when this happens, when it goes over like that. And then we want it to trigger false when we go over like this. And when it hits the bottom of the ladder, so bottom of the ladder is down here, for instance. So when this hits right about here, and those are intersecting like so, we want onTriggerEnter to trigger bottom of ladder true, and then onTriggerExit to make it so that it's false when he climbs up to about here. So let's move our player to about right there for now. So going back into our scripting now that we've explained that, let's go over to where it says onTriggerEnter. We're going to use something really handy called switch statement, which is like a cleaner way to do if, else if, else if. It basically just has one case for each thing. You say switch, you put the parentheses like this. This works. Whatever's inside this parentheses is the criteria by what we want to test things out on. It's like the left side of an if statement. So, and it'll make more sense here in a second. We're going to test it all based on what part we are in. And then we create some brackets like so. And we say case ladder part dot complete. And then we do a colon like so. And then when we want to be finished with this whole switch statement, we say break. And then whatever happens between this complete right here, this colon right here, and break will occur if this ladder part is ladder part.complete. So if this ladder is set to the ladder part.complete, this will function right here, and we'll make multiple other things inside of here as well for the bottom and the top, because we want each thing to do something different. I like to build in the whole thing at first, like that, and that should be everything that we want. And then at the bottom here, we put a default, just in case we messed up, we script something new inside of here, like, you know, a very top of the ladder or above ladder or something like that, another state, and we never program it in here. We want a default that just, you know, does nothing, basically. So we put a default, and we put another break, and that will basically make it so that this whole thing does nothing if we add something else inside of there. You can also put a debug inside of here to let you know that this has happened, but it gets kind of messy too, so it's really up to you how you want to do that part. Now, another way of thinking about this whole thing is that this is like the equivalent of the left side of the if statement, and this is like the equivalent of the right side of the if statement. So another way of doing this would be if part equals ladder part dot complete. Literally, this right here, up through this point right here, is the same thing as this right here, right? And everything that happens between this and this is like the same thing as these brackets right here. And then, if you do else if part equals ladder part dot bottom, and do this, we built this whole thing up. This is about these two things. This if else if is about the equivalent to this right here. And we can keep on going, you know, etc. But I hope that you guys get that point by now. If you don't, leave me a comment below. I'm kind of curious. Now, the thing is, we only want the switch statement to actually do something if the collision that we're hitting is the player. Let's actually go if collision dot get component player controller. Now, this will only return true if there's a player controller on that collision. So it'll test the collider, and then it'll pull up and see if we can find a player controller on that guy. I think this is a little bit cleaner way than using a tag. We could have also used the tag for the player. And then we're going to select this whole switch statement right here. We're going to control exit to cut it. And then we're going to tab over, and then we're just going to put it inside of here right here. And now our switch statement's built in, and it'll only run if that's a player controller. We're going to say player controller player equals, and then we're going to say collision dot get component player controller. It would help if I could spell. And then we are done with that right there. Alright, so now over here we can just simply say player dot climb equals true. Now we're going to go back to our player controller. We're going to build in a couple more variables inside of here. We're going to say public bool bottom ladder equals false to start off with. Public bool top ladder also equals false to start off with. And then we're going to go back to our ladder, and we're going to manipulate this ladder part again. We're going to say player dot bottom ladder equals true, and player dot top ladder equals true on there. And then, of course, we need to select this entire if statement. We need to copy it, and then we're going to paste it over here inside of this, and we're going to simply change all of these to falses. So false, false, and false. Now we're going to go back over to our player controller, and we're going to start figuring out where we want to change over, and we're going to do it based off of movements, because movements where a lot of our stuff runs on everything. And we're going to simply put in an if statement right here, if can climb, and we're going to put an and statement in here as well, and we're going to actually go input dot get axis vertical is greater than 0.1f, and we want this whole thing right here to actually be an absolute value, because we want him to be able to start climbing if he pushes down or up. So we're going to say mathf dot absolute value, and this will do it. So what this is going to do is going to return us a number here based on whether somebody's pushing the up arrow, down arrow, WS, you know, whatever you have set for your up and down vertical axis. And it's going to return the absolute value of that, so it's always going to be a positive number. And if that number is bigger than 0.1, meaning, and it always returns a number between 0 and 1. So if it's basically 0.1 is our dead zone, meaning that if you're using a controller and you've slightly touched the thing, it won't trigger it. So if this happens, then this if statement will function here, and we can start to climb. So we're going to just build a whole new thing onto here. We're going to just simply say climb. I really meant to say climb, don't autocorrect me. And we're going to build it in down here, private void climb. You know what? Instead of doing climb over here, let's actually just set state equals state.climb. There we go. So let's change that. So if this is functioning and if that is bigger than 0.1f, we'll say state equals state.climb, and then we'll have a climb function down here. Now, we need that climb function to actually be running, so if we go over to where our update is, which is where we are doing all of this stuff, and we go if state equals state.climb, then we want to run climb, and then it'll be else if we're not hurt, we'll run movement. This will start to control all of our movement when we're climbing from here on forward. So it's important to realize that this is where our climb is initialized right here, and then this is where our climb is actually running every frame of the game. And it gets kind of messy because we're interacting this many ways. The state machine is definitely not the best that I built up. I built it so that it was easy to learn, but yeah, it's at this point it gets kind of messy when we get beyond like the basics. So yeah, I mean, let me know if you guys want to see a better state machine inside of the platformer tutorial. Maybe I'll build one up so that you guys can see it better, but it requires us to reprogram this whole thing. So we're going to add the ladder onto all of our ladder parts here. Top of ladder, bottom of ladder, and then we of course change the part over to what the part that it actually is. So we say the bottom right there, the top over here, and then we have the complete ladder as the complete ladder, of course. So if we go over back inside our player controller, right now when he's switching to his climb state, he's instantly switching out of it. That's because our animation state doesn't have a climb state inside of it, so it goes all the way down to this else, and it just goes back to state.idle instantaneously. So if we put inside of here first, state equals state.idle, state.climb, no, we want to be out of state.idle. And we'll just have this in here, and then we'll change this to an else if right below it in the state.jumping. And remember guys, this should all be if and else ifs. If, else if, else if, else if, else if, else. It'd be way better to use the switch statement, but whatever. And now if we go back into our game, if I get switched into my climb state, we will lose all functionality, hopefully. And we did. Good. Just by hitting the up button right next to the ladder. Alright, that's really good guys. We need it so that his position is getting set onto that ladder when it's happening. So if we go over here, we're going to actually start to manipulate some things. You're going to learn a couple new things really fast. So we're going to actually want to make it so that his X position can't be moved at all. So we're going to say rb.constraints. Now constraints are these things on the rigid body down here where you can freeze your different positions and you can freeze your rotation. And it does not make it so that we can't set our position through the transform. It does make it so that the rigid body will no longer allow him to move otherwise. We're going to freeze the position over here. And the thing is, when you set a constraint, it resets all three of these things. So we have to set the constraint on the X. And this rotation, remember, makes it so the character doesn't just do, front flips all the time. So we're going to freeze the rotation as well. So we're going to go back onto here. We're going to set that up. We're going to go to where it says constraints, and we're going to go rigid body constraints. Now, rigid body constraints 2D. Now, rigid body constraints 2D is an enumerator, and so you say dot, and you want to freeze position X, which is our left to right position, and you want to put one of those straight lines. This is shift, that button right above your enter key, and then you're going to hit another rigid body constraint on this, and you're going to do dot freeze rotation. Now, we're going to scroll up to our ladder variables really fast. We're going to have a public ladder. We're going to go back to our ladder script, and we're going to go when we hit this ladder over here in complete, we're going to add another thing onto the player over here. We're going to say dot ladder equals this. Go back to our player controller. We now have access to the ladder whenever we trigger it over. We're going to go down to the movement and where the ladder is being triggered over. I know this is cutting off on your guys' screen. You know what? I'll just move it down like that. There you go. And then we're going to set the location of our character. So we're going to say transform.position equals, we'll say new vector 3. And we're going to say ladder.transform.position.x, and we're also going to say rb.position.y. This will set our x position to the ladder's position, but keep us at the same height that we are currently at. And then if we hit save on here really fast, We go back into the game. If we run over to the ladder now and we hit a button, we'll just automatically be at the right position at this point, and we'll just kind of fall like a log because gravity is still running over here inside of our rigid body. So we need to also set our gravity scale over here when we're initializing our climb to 0. So let's go over here and say rb.gravityscale equals 0f. And we need to also have a variable that keeps track of our gravity beforehand. So if we go back to ladder variables, we're going to say private float natural gravity. And inside of our start, we're going to say natural gravity. And it has to be after RB equals rigid body because we need to use the rigid body to find this. RB.gravityscale. So now that we have the gravity set on there, we can start to mess with our climb a little bit more. We also want to climb speed on here. We're going to serialize that variable. So we're going to go back up here. We're going to say serialize field, and we're going to say float climb speed, and we'll set it to 3f by nature. This will just be like our speed, except for this is going to be what we multiply our climbing by instead of just doing our speed. That way we can have a different run speed combined to our climb speed. We're also going to be hiding these things in the inspector, which works like the opposite of serialized field. So what it does is it makes it so that your public variables don't show up in the inspector, and we really don't need these 3 in there, so you can just copy that, paste, paste, and there we go. So if we scroll back down here, we can start to build in the functionality of climb into this. We're going to be getting a float speed v direction equals input dot get axis vertical. Alright, so we want to be able to test whether we're moving up or down, so we're going to say if v direction is greater than 0.1f, then we're going to be climbing up, and then else if the v direction is less than negative 0.1f, then we're climbing down, and else we are just sitting still. So you might want to even put those inside of comments over here, so climbing up. At the same time, we want to say that you can only climb up if you're not at the top of the ladder, right? I mean, you only want to be able to climb down if you're not at the bottom of the ladder. We put those 2 variables in there earlier, and then we can simply make it so that we can move at this point right here. So we can say rb.velocity is equivalent to new vector 2, and we'll put 0f because we don't want to move anywhere horizontally, but we do want to move vertically, so we're going to multiply our v direction by the climb speed. And that is done, and then we want to copy this and put it the exact same thing into this else if right here, like so. At this point right here, this should more or less be functioning. Let's go ahead and double test it. And it is. Now, part of the problem here is that our linear drag is just too low, so our character is just continuously moving on there all the time. So we're going to simply move the linear drag to 2. We want to make sure that it still feels good over here inside the game so that he is able to run a little bit better, but he was stopping a little bit too late anyway. Linear drag is equivalent to friction, by the way. So now if we climb, we should stop in a reasonable amount of time, and at some point we should stop here at the top, but it's still not functioning quite right. So let's move this up to like 5, and then we're kind of stopping on a dime, which is kind of how I want it anyway. And yes, we're stopping at the top of the ladder and stopping at the bottom. But of course we're going to stop there anyway because there's a floor there. All right, good. Now we want him to be able to get off the ladder by jumping. So we'll go down here inside of movement and where it says this, and we're just going to copy this over, right? We're going to go down here to our climb function, and we want to put this if statement right here in the front center so that it just works. We want to delete this part right here that says if it's touching the ground, because you do not need to be touching the ground if you're climbing a ladder already. And then now, if we go back in here, we should be able to climb a little bit and jump right off. And ta-da! Somewhat works. Now, we're getting close to the end here, guys, so let's start really finishing this off. We're going to go back into our scripting really fast, and we're going to go over and make it so that when the jump function is occurring, so right here, we're going to be exiting this, and we need to basically undo everything that we did when we came inside of here. So we're just going to take this all, copy it, and literally just paste it right here. Now we don't need to change the state anymore, so we'll delete that. And we need to fix our constraints, and we no longer want to be freezing our position.x, so we're going to be getting rid of this. And we want to make it so that our character won't just climb when we're pushing around our arrows or anything. So we're going to say can climb. It's going to be equivalent to false. We also want to make it so that our position is not getting changed, but we want our gravity scale to be switching back to our natural gravity. like this. And that will kind of fix up all that. And then we want all that to be happening before we jump. So we'll cut it and paste it right above there. Control X, Control V. Control X cuts, Control V paste. You can also select everything, right click, and do it right through your normal methods over there. So if we go back into our game now, we hit play, run around, jump off, jump back on, and so on and so forth. Now we, of course, we need to make our animation for our character. So we go to our artwork, we go to our sprites, we go to the player over here, we go to climb, and we can simply make a new climb animation for him. We go over to our player, we go on the window, we want to open up our animation window, so we go animation, animation, and then we're going to make a new clip. We're going to call it climb. Fine. We can then just kind of select all these, move it onto this, and then you can select this little box here on the end and move it around. We want it to be about, what, there? Of course, I forgot, per usual, to switch this to, I think it's 16 in this case. We hit apply. So right now, if we go over here on the top, you can kind of drag things over and see what he would look like in each step. We want that last one to remain for a while, so we're just going to kind of not do that. And we're going to just take this first one again and just drag it over here. All right, not bad, but I don't quite like it. So we're going to delete this first frame right here. We're going to move all these over like so. We're going to take this this middle one right here and just kind of move it like this. And then we're going to want this one back over. So I'm going to copy and paste that, and we're going to move that over here like so. And then if we play it again, it should start to look a little bit better. We want this last one to remain for a little while. This one's supposed to be the right hand, I believe. Hit play. Another one of these, like right about here. Play again. Box select all of them like so. You can select this little box here at the end and just kind of compress it over to like about a full-blown second there and see how it looks. That looks about right to me. Go ahead and exit that. We go over to our animator. So we can just drag over our climb state over here, and then we're going to go ahead and make a transition backwards. We're going to go ahead and click off that exit time. No transition duration, because those are for pansies. We're going to say state does not equal to 5, and state, take all these off. Go state equals 5. So we go ahead and hit play one more time. We now climb upwards, climb downwards. Now it continuously runs the animations, the only problem. So what we want to do inside of here, one last time here inside the scripting, is we want to go down to the script over here. We're going to go where it's climbing up. We're going to say anim.speed is equivalent to 1f. Instead of climbing down, anim.speed is equivalent to 1f. And when he's standing still, though, we want anim.speed to be equivalent to 0f. And then when he's jumping off, we also want anim.speed to be equivalent to 1f again. So what this is going to do, and make sure that you have the anim.speed equals 0f down here, is it's going to make it so that his animation freezes when he's not moving either up or down. So he freezes, and he freezes. And also what we want to do inside of here is make it so that it's a little bit more reactive. So we're going to go back to our scripting again for another last time. We're going to say rb.velocity equals vector2 dot 0, which is equivalent to having the same thing, new vector2 0f 0f. So we go back inside our game, hit that play button, and he simply stops on there. And this will also fix the problem without having to mess with the linear drag too. We did that linear drag earlier. This will make it so that as soon as he hits the top, it no longer functions correctly there. And so on with the bottom as well. Then you can jump off at any time. Oh, I guess you can't jump upwards though. So in order to fix the bug that's going on here, it's still running everything down here below it. So what you want to do when you have a situation like this where you don't want anything else to run, you can just simply hit return like so, because we don't want any of the stuff below it to run. And this will return a void, which is what this has right here, which will do a whole lot of nothing. So if we go back into Unity, and then we hit the play button for the final time, I believe. And we can now jump over and get that all finished. I think that's it for ladders, guys. We built it up. It works somewhat. I know that's a long video, guys, but I hope that you enjoyed it and that this is what you wanted out of it, because this was definitely a requested video. Like several people requested it. So hope this is what you guys wanted, that it worked out for you guys. Let me know what else you guys want to see in this series. I'm only adding to it based on requests at this point because I'm hoping that it's more or less complete at this point. But if you guys want more, you want different things that I just didn't think of, just let me know. As you can see, ladders was a lot more intense than you would think just from thinking about ladders. Anyways, like, subscribe, leave a comment. Thank you guys. Have a good day. Bye.